Brendan Dassey, trial transcript, day 3, page 204, continuing questioning of Tom Sturd. Okay, now you indicated you found some small and what you believe to be small in pieces of bone in that large wad of steel belts? Yes. Did you find any in the van seat? No. The bone material was intertwined in all this steel belt. You mentioned that what drew your attention to this area in particular was having seen a small bone fragment about 8 feet from the front end of the bone of the burn pit? Yes. And about how big a bone fragment was it? As I estimated, it was about 1 inch by 1 inch, just a small bone fragment. Could you tell by looking at that bone fragment whether it was human or animal? I could not. Do you have expertise in bone fragments, being able to distinguish between human and the animal? I do not, sir. When you refer to a skull bone fragment in the burn pit, you don't have an expertise that it's distinguished between skull fragments and other fragments? No, sir. You were just assuming? Wasn't assumption. I think what I testified to is I thought that it was important that we pick these bones up and have them analyzed to determine whether or not they were human bones and Teresa Hallbach's. Okay, but I mean, at the time you arrived at the scene, you didn't know what they were? I did not, sir, no. But they at least provided you with some sort of potential evidential value that you wanted to protect it or preserve it? That's correct. In Exhibit 173, I'll put that back up on the Elmo, you were describing the screwdriver in the middle of this pit area, correct? Yes, sir. And actually, I think I might have misspoke. It's actually on the outer edge of the pit area. Well, I believe the screwdriver was, I consider the pit the concave area, or that area that had that 6-foot rectangular area that was scooped out. The screwdriver, was it burned? I believe it just had, you can see soot on the handle. Did you see any indication where it's burned here? Nothing on the metal portion? No. Didn't have that same look, for instance, as the spade of the shovel? No, this is the way it appears. Okay. Attorney Freeman, thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing else. The court, any redirect? Attorney Fallon, none. The court, you may step down. The witness, thank you. The court, you're welcome. Attorney Fallon, we have one last witness. The court, all right. Attorney Fallon, state would call Don Smiley to the stand. The court, why don't you just remain standing there and take the oath, please? Donald Smiley, called as a witness herein, having been first duly sworn, was examined and testified as follows. The clerk, please be seated. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record. The witness, my name is a Donald O. Smiley, Smiley. It's the second. Direct examination by Attorney Fallon. What do you do for a living? I'm a general dentist in Madison, Wisconsin. And how long have you been employed in that capacity? I graduated from Marquette University in 1976 and have been there ever since. What type of dentistry do you practice? General dentistry is a family dentistry where I take care of patients and their general oral health. I also am a consultant in forensic dentistry. All right, and what is forensic dentistry? Forensic dentistry can basically be defined as the application of the science of dentistry to the field of law. I'm sorry, slow down, the application of science of dentistry to the field of law. There are a number of different areas that can be involved in forensic dentistry. Routine dental identifications are the most commonly involved, where the individuals that are not viewable or visually identifiable need to be identified. Mass disaster involvement, just dental identifications taken to a higher number. Child abuse cases, bite mark evidence, dental malpractice and negligence in trauma of injury that are involved in litigation. All right, and how is it that you are involved in this case, doctor? Received a phone call from Special Agent Duranda Freymiller on November 9 of 2005. What were you asked to do? She asked me to assist in the identification of an individual that was recovered in Manitowoc County. All right, and why are you here today? To render my opinion after analysis of the remains and to give my opinion. All right, well, before we get to the opinion and your findings in this case, if you would tell us a little bit about yourself. First of all, tell us where you received your undergraduate degree. I graduated from Elmhurst College in 1972, I'm sorry. Received a BS degree there, and then in 1976, I graduated from Marquette University School of Dentistry. And if you would tell us a little bit about your forensic dental experience, what are some of the types of things that you did? Well, I've been involved in forensic dentistry since 1981. Most of the cases I do are dental identification cases. Again, bite mark evidence, child abuse cases. Been involved in 435 cases approximately. That does not include work where I was involved in the World Trade Center and down in Katrina. We'll touch base with them in just a moment. Okay. Just so that we're clear, tell the jury what a dental identification is. What does it mean? Dental identification it means a positive identification. If an individual is decomposed or skeletonized or burned beyond recognition, if there's been disfigurement to the face where a visual identification is not applicable or fingerprint identification is not available, sometimes you resort to dental identifications, which is usually easier, quicker, cheaper than DNA. All right, and have you been called upon to render expert opinion on dental identification in the past? Yes, sir, I have. Any estimate as to approximately how many times you've been asked to express an opinion, meaning in court testimony? Regarding a dental identification, yes. I've testified, I believe, 32 times. Most of those were involved with dental identifications, probably 3/4 of them. The other ones were in bite mark cases, and I think there's only one that was involved in an injury case, personal injury case. All right, you mentioned something about a disaster response experience. You mentioned something about the World Trade Center and Katrina. How were you involved in those types of responses? I'm a member of a national disaster team. It's part of what they call NDMS, or the National Disaster Medical System, which currently operates underneath the Health and Human Services. And it was under Health and Human Services at September 11. And then they restructured things. And then Katrina, they were actually underneath Department of Homeland Security and FEMA. And now we're back with Health and Human Services. And I've been involved with this NDMS, and they have a DMORT team, and DMORT stands for Disaster Mortuary Operational Response Team. And I've been involved with the DMORT team for a number of years, but I've only actually deployed or activated twice. And once was for the World Trade Center, and then once was for Katrina. And your role in those responses was what? To assist and help in the identification of the individuals. All right, are you familiar with a standing or a title called board certification? Yes, sir. Tell us what that is. To be board certified would indicate that you have I'd say a higher degree of experience or expertise or training in the area of, in this particular case, forensic dentistry. It means taking a examination. In my particular case, to be qualified, you have to submit an application. I believe the application that I submitted, and I was board certified in 1993, was consisted of 2 3-ring binders that were full of documentation of cases that I've been involved with, court testimony, documentation of affiliations with certain agencies, continuing education. And then if you're deemed to be board eligible to take the examination is it's a 2-day written oral examination that you have to take to pass. All right, and so I take it then from your comments you are a board certified forensic dentist? Yes, sir. All right, how many board certified forensic dentists are there in Wisconsin, for instance? There are only 2 of us in Wisconsin. All right, and in terms of generally in North America, United States, and Canada in particular, do you have any idea approximately how many board certified dentists there are? There are approximately 100 board certified dentists in North America. Do you belong to any professional organizations? You mentioned the National Disaster Medical System. Are there any other organizations that you are a member of that assist you in your forensic work? There are a number of different organizations that I belong to. I'm not so sure that they assist me, although I shouldn't say that either, because they do assist me in the fact that you gain continuing education and additional learning experiences from these organizations. The American Society of Forensic Odontology is kind of an entry-level organization, but it's one of the biggest forensic organizations in the country and the world. The American Academy of Forensic Sciences is probably one of the premier organizations in the United States. I'm also a member of the Wisconsin Association for Identification, the Wisconsin Coroners and Medical Examiners Association, and then the board affiliation with the American Board of Forensic Odontology. And odontology is just a fancy name for dentistry. All right, and drawing your attention just very briefly to Exhibit 182. Do you recognize Exhibit 182? Yes, sir, I do. What is Exhibit 182? This is a copy of my CV or curriculum vitae. All right, and is that an accurate summary of your educational and professional experience as it relates to the field of forensic dentistry? Yes, sir, it is. All right, now to this case, when was it that you first became involved in the case, doctor? That would have been on November 9 of 2005. All right, and what were you asked to do? Well, Special Agent Freymiller had asked me to assist in the identification, and then Assistant District Attorney Jeff Freilich had called and wanted to know, number one, that I'd already looked at some of the remains on that date and wanted to know if they were human or non-human. And then he also wanted to know a little bit about my background and my qualifications. All right. Did it come to pass that you were asked to examine items to determine whether or not they involved your field of forensic dentistry? Yes, sir. And approximately how many items were you asked to examine and attempt identification of? There were 6 times that I received evidence. A total number of pieces of potential evidence were 52 potential items of evidence. All right, and tell us about those items. What did they consist of? When I say potential, because initially it's difficult to identify some burned and fragmented dental structures. So potential, meaning that some of the items that were recovered were not dental structures, but it wasn't initially known then, or they wanted to be verified. There were, I believe, 24 dental structures, root fragments, crown fragments. There was not one whole tooth that I was able to examine. There were 3 bone fragments. There were 24 pieces of wood that, again, looked like dental structures, and 1 piece of plastic. Is it at all unusual to have, for instance, a piece of wood mistaken for a tooth? No, sir, it's quite common. It's easy for anybody else to misidentify them or to exclude them or not identify them as tooth structures. In fact, sometimes I can't even identify them without taking x-rays because they look totally different radiographically or on the x-rays. And is that particularly more problematic when they've been consumed in a fire? Yes, sir. All right, having said that, would you tell us or describe for us the condition of the 24 tooth fragments and the 3 bone fragments that you examined? They were all burned, they were all charred, they were very, very brittle. Again, they didn't look like normal tooth like we would normally see, and essentially the crowns were all gone. What we were looking at was just the root structure, which was part of the tooth that's buried in the bone. There was one portion of a crown, but that portion of the crown was from a cuspid or an eye tooth and was not able to be identified. All right, in terms of the condition of these fragments, how do they compare to other fragments that you've been asked to examine in attempt to identification of in the past? Since 1981, I've examined a number of individuals who've been burned, and these were probably among the worst that I've examined. Are you familiar with a phrase that some dentists use called fracture matching? Yes, sir. What is fracture matching? When you fracture match something, you can put 2 pieces back together, and if I can say that they came from a common source, that they were at one time one piece, you can fracture match them back together. Did you attempt any fracture matching in this case? Yes, sir, I did. All right, tell us about that. There were 2 root fragments that I was able to fracture match back together. Actually, I should say 4. There were 2 that were very critical, but there were 2 other ones that ended up being academic. The 2 critical ones were root fragments from the lower right second molar, which would be tooth number 31, which we call it, and that particular tooth, the crown again was destroyed, but there were 2 roots associated with that tooth, and they were separate, but I could put those back together, and I could see that they had initially come at one time, been together. And then to fracture match them, I put them back together, and then I applied a little cyanoacrylate or superglue so that they stick together. All right, and is that a common approach? Yes, sir. And what is the benefit of fracture matching? Well, there's a couple of benefits really. Number one, if you've got 52 pieces of potential evidence, if you can combine that down so that there's a little bit less, that's a small advantage, not a big one. The big one is that these pieces of dental remains are extremely brittle when they're burned and they're charred, and these 2 pieces of dental structures could be very easily crushed with finger pressure. If they're dropped, they could be broken, and if that happens, that potential piece of evidence is lost. It's gone forever. So by supergluing them and fracture matching and putting them back together and reinforcing them with the cyanoacrylate, you can preserve, you can protect, and maintain that evidence better. All right, and in this particular case, did you attempt to make a comparison? Yes, sir, I did. All right, and that would assume then that you had something to compare or standards to compare the fracture match tooth with something else? That's correct.